I'm going to do something I consistently criticize people for, but we don't currently have data that contradicts it. In the last election in Canada, we had consistent polling that undecideds were substantial, and they would not pick Stephen Harper. So we had like 25% undecided, and like 2% of them said that they might consider the Conservatives. So we had like a quarter of the population that was saying that they hadn't decided whether they were going to vote for the Liberals or the NDP. But if you remove the undecideds from the polling, right, if you just take them right out, then it badly skewed the results for the Conservatives. Because what you're doing is you're essentially reducing the sample size. And you're reducing the sample size in such a way that you're throwing, people on the left swing right out of the polling data. So you'd see these polls that say, the Conservatives are running at like 40, 45%. But then when you look at it, you say, well, okay, they're running at 40% out of that 75%, not including the 25% that said that they're not going to vote for them. And when you actually work the math out, wait a second, okay, they are running around 30%, which is what all the other polls said. And so the actual results were consistent with each other, but they were presented in a way that was very dishonest. And so a lot of what I was arguing against was that no, you can't distribute the data like this. You can't do this. You can't just say the undecideds will vote for everybody in the same proportion, because we have data that contradicts that. And in the end, what happened was that the undecideds swung hard towards the Liberals. If you look at the polling aggregates, you're going to see some bumps in the way the Conservatives came up. It's not accurate. The reality is that the Conservatives were running flat 30% all the way through, and there was huge volatility between the Liberals and the NDP. But what we ended up seeing were polls that exaggerated this position through most of the race until the undecideds finally came down. I don't see any polling that right now. The polling that we see is that both candidates are very unpopular, right? So if the data in Canada said they're undecided, but we don't know if they're going to vote for the Liberals or the Conservatives, we don't know if they're going to vote for the Liberals or the NDP. We know they're not going to vote for the Conservatives. What the data with the undecideds that we're seeing right now says is they don't want to vote for either of them, right? And that's harder to read. It could be that all of the undecideds will vote for Johnson or Stein. It's a lot, but that's a lot harder to assign all of the undecideds to a third-party candidate in a two-party system than it is to assign them to the natural governing party, the Liberals, in a multi-party system. It could happen, right? But it's a bad assumption because it's not as likely. In Canada, we looked at the data. It said they're undecided, but they've decided they don't want to vote for the Conservatives. Well, if the choice is between the Liberals or the NDP, they're probably going to vote for the Liberals because the Liberals usually win, right? Liberals are the major party. Undecided meant probably Liberal, but we're not sure. What undecided seems to mean right now is neither. But can they actually go out and pull the trigger? Or we can say that they might distribute, which is what polling companies usually do. I hate doing that. You do it when you don't have any other data. It's a vanilla assumption. It's usually wrong. But we don't have data, so this is the situation where you make that assumption, and so I'm going to do it anyways. Okay? I don't like it, but we don't have a better choice right now. If you look at the RCP average, it's pinning 9% undecided. And then if you distribute it, what you get, work it out, well, 42 out of 91 is 46, and etc. You can take a look at that. And it most closely matches the 1996 results for Johnson and Perot. The difference being that Clinton's down about 3 points because of Stein. Perot's numbers are very close to Johnson's. Trump's numbers are very close to Dole's. Clinton's down about 3 points, which is the difference from Stein. So if you do make this assumption that the undecideds will distribute in the end, then the wild card in using 1996 to predict 2016 is Jill Stein. If you do in the end, say Stein's numbers collapse and it all goes back to Clinton, then you look at 1992 as a very, that's your model. Look at 1992. It will be predictive, broadly. We need to make some things have changed. Virginia has changed. West Virginia has changed. Right? The uncertainty may move east a little bit, right? So instead of Clinton winning the string of states up the Ohio Valley, like Kentucky and Kentucky, Tennessee, etc., she may end up winning the states on the East Coast instead, right? So there's been some movement and some variation. It's not going to look exactly like 1992 because it's national rather than local, right? If we could do the same thing with local polls, right? So let's look at the polls in North Carolina. In the end, do the polls in North Carolina look more like 92 or 96? That's the way you're going to want to do it in the end, right? Not taking a national number and trying to, distribute it broadly. There's the uniform distribution. We don't like that, right? Instead, we're going to want to look at local data. Does North Carolina look a lot like 1992? Well, in the end, it might. Does Kentucky look a lot like 1996? In the end, it might. In the end, it might not. But you might end up just seeing that shift take over, right? I'm not saying that these are good models yet. I'm just looking at it and saying, gee, it does look kind of similar, doesn't it? But either way, you can't you can't do that sort of broad. This is too big, right? This is overly broad. You need data that's more specific. Nonetheless, those numbers do look very similar, don't they? And you can draw some conclusions from that. Not that it's going to look exactly the same, but we'll get to that in a minute. On the other hand, what if they don't distribute? What if they all go to a third party? Now, I'm not going to say they're all going to go to Johnson. I'm not going to say they're all going to go to Stein. I'm just going to say they're going to go to other, okay? Well, the adjusted RCP average there is Clinton at 42, Trump at 37, other at 20. If you look at 1992, it's very close. Okay. The difference between the two Clintons is 0.8. The difference between Trump and Bush is 0.4. And the difference between Perot and other is 0.4. Yeah. Very close. And so, if you look at it's the undecideds right now that are the uncertainty. That's where the volatility is. Okay. And whether you're looking at 92 or 96 as the better predictor, with many caveats, is going to depend on how you interpolate the undecideds. If we had more data on undecideds, we could make that decision. Is it more likely that the undecideds are going to, in the end, swing all towards an independent, like what happened in 1992? Or is it more likely that the undecideds are going to kind of distribute, which is kind of more like what happened in 1996? I'm not doing an ethnic analysis. I'm not throwing any racist arguments around. I don't care what Hispanics vote for. Like that means anything. Give me data based on ideology, and tell me what undecideds are really thinking. What does it mean for somebody to say that they're not decided yet in the 2016 election? Does it mean that they're not going to vote for either of the major candidates? Or does it mean that they really are undecided and in the end it comes out in the wash? We don't know. And so this is not predictive yet. There's just too much volatility. Very different than the last election in Canada, where the Conservatives had flatlined for months and nothing moved them. Clinton's graph could still careen out of control, producing a landslide. Okay? It looks a lot like either 92 or 96 right now. That doesn't mean that that's what it'll look like in a couple of months from now. Okay? But this is what we've got right now. And this is what we, there's, like I say, I'm not going to do a regression analysis and try to use it to predict the future. I'm going to look at what we have right now and see what the most similar previous election was to this one. But as mentioned previously, you also have to make some smart adjustments. Okay, these are national polls. You have to distribute them. You can't do it uniformly. But it should give you an idea about which states are in play and which ones aren't. And I've compiled a list here. I've scratched a few off. That's the intelligent adjustments. And you wanna play with things, right? So in 1996, the Democrats won Kentucky by less than 1%, based on the split, right? Because of Ross Perot. It might not be as close this time, because the gulf between Democrats and Republicans has widened in Kentucky, but it's shrunk in North Carolina. In 1996, the Republicans won North Carolina by 5% because of the split, because of Ross Perot. So what you might see is that flip, right? Kentucky is closer to Virginia, so let's talk about Tennessee and North Carolina instead, because they're, I believe, right beside each other. Is that right? Let's see here. Let's make sure that's right. It's, North Carolina and Tennessee that are very close to each other, right? Okay. So this is what I'm saying here, right? Is that it seems like this swath of area has changed places with this swath of area, right? So she's going to win Virginia and lose Kentucky. That's a flip. She's going to win North Carolina and lose Tennessee. That's a flip. Lose South Carolina. Sorry, maybe win South Carolina. Well, that's kind of an isolation, right? Or maybe you can talk about South Carolina and Mississippi flipping, right? But it's like it's moved that way. I think she could still win Missouri, but I mean Arkansas is, probably not. Arkansas and Louisiana probably not. But Texas and Kansas maybe, right? So we've also got a flip on this side of the river. Maybe less likely over here and more likely over here. Right? We can do I have my focus on here? Is that better? Probably. Yeah, so certainly it looks like the split's going to help her more here and less here. Still, we could still see a landslide, right? It's still early. But it looks like I say right now that, whereas the Republicans won those states in 92, it looks like the Republicans will win those states in 92, and whereas the Democrats won those states in 92, and it's the same thing over here on that side of the river. Democrats have a better chance in this line of states and a weaker chance in that line of states. So you can talk maybe a little bit about migration, demographics, these kinds of things, but that's the switch that's happened, right? And so you have to make those kinds of smart adjustments. But I mean, here's my list, and I think that it's a different list of swing states, right? So I don't think Colorado's a swing state. I thought maybe Virginia was, but the data is not bringing that up. People are talking about Georgia. People are talking about Arizona. I think people should be talking about Kentucky, Tennessee. In the end, the Republicans may end up winning these states, but I think it will be a lot closer than people are expecting. I think Missouri is a legit swing state this cycle, though, and I think the data upholds that too. Right? Again, the idea that you can take the last cycle and convert it into this cycle, I don't like that idea. Rather, I prefer to take, like I say, look at previous results and let in the States, the way that you want to do it is you want to take the general election results, try to match it, and then hone in, right? Like I say, it's not going to be exactly the same because you've had regional volatility. And the states are smaller, right? Ontario's a big place. And I suppose that if you were to take like the entire, if you were to take it, it might be the case that the states are different, right? So it's going to be that line of states that's more likely to go this time around instead of that time. But if you were to take the whole area, right? Like the whole southeast, and take that as a bigger area, I think that you would find that it's almost identical to either 92 or 96, depending on how you interpolate the undecideds. It doesn't help. Like, that's not predictive, but I think that it's useful in understanding at the least, right? You can't distribute it identically, but you can at least say, okay, the area is behaving the same way, but you've got to, you've got to fit that differently to adjust for the different demographics. I don't have that data. That's why I'm talking like this. If I had that data, I could do it. And you'll notice that I'm not actually doing any math. I'm just, it's a smart intellectual analysis, not a nuts and bolts kind of thing, right? And really, maybe that's the difference between what I'm doing and what some of the other people are doing, right? These other people are just taking numbers and methods and just blindly putting it in, right? They're acting like we criticize engineers and scientists, right? They're following out the tests, they're putting the data in, they're running through the machine, they're spinning the wheel. They don't really understand what they're doing. I'm doing the opposite. I'm pointing out why you can't do the things they're doing, but I'm not actually doing any math, right? I'm telling you the kind of math you probably should do, and the reasons you shouldn't do the math that you are doing. Like I said, we don't know yet if it's going to be 92 or 96 or something else altogether, right? Because we don't know how undecideds are going to work. But what you want to do is you want to take that data and then you want to tweak it based on what we understand about the demographic. This is where the demographics make a difference. Maybe not racial demographics, but certainly educational, income, class, right? Age, that kind of thing, right? So Virginia versus Kentucky in 2016 is different than Virginia versus Kentucky in 1996, obviously, right? 20 years ago, it has changed. But the same basic shape is going to be there. And like I say, you want to just flip it in the mirror. I'm telling you, that will tell you, probably. But like I say, it's still early, and I think those states are up for grabs still, okay? I'm sorry. And we can still use 92 or 96 to model that if we understand it in a regional sense rather than a nuts and bolts sense. But then you have to fit it based on what we understand about today rather than then, right? I'm not going to actually do it, but that's how you would do it. You don't want to just take regression analyses and lines of best fit. That's crazy, right? With states like Georgia and Arizona, it'll probably be roughly the same, right? But it'll be a big difference on the east there versus the Ohio Valley, and a big difference, I think, like I say, probably on the direct west side of the Mississippi. It's moved over. I think she might not win Arkansas. She probably won't win Arkansas, but there's an off chance she could win Kansas or Texas. right? Or Nebraska. Or the Dakotas. The only states that are really safe are Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah. But again, I mean, that doesn't mean she'll win all of them. It just means that they're all in play. Because of the third party dynamic. And volatility around that. It's September 1st today. I did this write-up yesterday on August 31st. I'll have a lot more for you at the beginning of November. I'm just saying that this ought to be the plan. We'll see how that works out.